Well, good day, everyone. Once again, another segment of Meet the Candidate. We've started these podcasts so that you get a candid look at your candidate and you get to know exactly the person that you are voting for. And I think you'll get to like them because it's an opportunity for them to come into your living room, your dining room, your kitchen, have a cup of coffee with them, and get to know them. And we have Rebecca and Daniel with us. Daniel Brownstein is our guest today, and very excited to have him. This is a continuation of our last segment where we talked more candidate with him, and we're going to give him an opportunity to talk about some more of the issues today. And good day, guys. How you doing?
Thanks so much for having me.
Don't you love how he calls it meet your candidate? It's know your candidate, Michael.
Know your candidate, but you're getting to meet your candidate.
Well, they're
yeah.
Well, that's very well, hopefully.
Yeah. So anyway, so today's segment, this is your platform, Daniel. You have a lot of good issues. You have a lot of good solutions, and we thought this would be your stage today.
Okay, that's great. I think that one of the things that I'm most passionate about is public education and making sure that our kids are getting the quality of education that they deserve, and that's a big problem in South Carolina. What I like about Rebecca is she has a young child and she has a lot of these same concerns. So I think that if we are both elected, and I sure hope that we are, I think that we're going to be able to work well together on education issues. And I also think it's one of those things that's a big opportunity for us to work across the aisle with other lawmakers as well, because I know that what we're doing here in South Carolina is not working and is not setting up our kids for the sort of success that we need to be doing it. I think that it's, here in South Carolina, we guarantee children a minimally adequate education, minimally adequate. I think that is totally wrong. That's failing our kids. We need to be providing every kid with a high quality 21st century education. Here in our two districts, I'm in 112, which is about half of Mount Pleasant, Sullivan's Island, and Isle of Palms. And Rebecca is in 110, which is essentially the other half of Mount Pleasant, as well as the Charleston Peninsula, and maybe even some other areas. I'm not positive about that. I think by and large, the schools that are in our areas, or certainly in my area, are high performing. I think that Rebecca has some schools that face more challenges, quite frankly, than my schools do.
Yeah.
But even if you look at the schools in my area, which is pretty affluent and has pretty involved parents, it's on the parents and the PTA to raise $150,000 a year at my children's school, Whitesides Elementary, and that funds things like reading interventionists, the computer lab, the STEM program, the art teacher. Those are things that I think are foundational to a quality education, and those are things that the state needs to be providing. And then when you think about the fact that we're raising this money for these programs in our schools, what's happening in some places that are less fortunate, what's going on in North Charleston or Hampton or Allendale, what kind of education are we providing to those folks? And, I think we're letting a lot of kids down right now. And that's something that I think Rebecca and I are committed to working on together.
I most definitely am. And I think that it's not just one problem or one issue happening here. I think it's so many different things that are going on with how it's funded. And not that it's getting funded from a lot of different areas, but I think it needs to be a little bit more robust in how it's being funded, as well as how much money is being put into there. And I think, Michael, I don't know if it was you and I that was talking about this earlier today. It's just that the economy needs to expand here so that we have the money to work with, because I know where I would spend the money. but
Oh,
it's
it's no
not.
brainer.
Yeah, the money isn't there, and so just getting smart about how we're bringing that in so that it's good for our environment and it supports a healthy lifestyle.
I
Right.
totally agree with that. I think that we were heading in before this pandemic. We were projecting to have somewhere around an $800 million surplus at the state level. That I think would have been ripe for diverting that into our schools. But I think the sad reality is that that money is gone. And we're going to have some very, very difficult choices to make and a lot of competing priorities. But with all that being said, I think that there is the possibility to improve what we're doing. I think that there's bipartisan support for it. And we're going to have to be real creative and come up with some ways to put some additional money towards schools. I think the logical place to start is with our most valuable resource in education, and that's our teachers. Right now, a teacher in South Carolina starts out at $29,000 a year. Here in Charleston, we're a little bit better than that. We start them out at $38,000 a year. But I would challenge you to live here off of $38,000
Right.
a year. It's impossible. You
Right.
cannot live in this community on $38,000 a year. And I think that what we're seeing is that our teachers and our guidance counselors and all the people who work at our schools, they have several jobs, 2 or 3 jobs, and they're being pulled in all of these different directions. And it's just unrealistic to expect somebody to be the best teacher that they're able to be when they're worried about putting food on their table, when
Right.
they're working all weekend trying to make ends meet. We need to make sure that teachers know their value to us, and that needs to be reflected in their paycheck.
You know what's interesting, Daniel? I read, I was talking with one of the politicians during one of the shows I was producing, and I love what he equated. He said, a teacher should be making what any major league third baseman is making, because they are affecting our children's future, and they're really shaping America's future, quite honestly. And I tend to agree with that. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that if you asked anybody, who are some of the people who most impacted the person that you are today, I would think most of us would list at least a teacher in there.
Yeah.
I can think of several that I had that made a lasting impact, and that's just how important our education and our teachers are. It really is I think the deciding factor between whether we're setting people up for success or we're setting them up to fail in this new economy.
But I really
Right.
think that it's a paradigm shift, that it's not just about funding, it's not just about teachers, which they definitely need to be making significantly more money. It's a paradigm shift of how we're teaching our kids. The model that we're using now is like 75 years old. We really, there's so many ways that we can be engaging children that we are not currently doing and using. And so I think that when we're talking about this, it's not just about how we fund it. It's not just about how much their teachers are getting paid. It's like bringing our education up to the updated 2020 or the updated what we imagine 2040 looking like.
Exactly. I think that there's, the changes that we have made to our educational system, a lot of them, I view them as being associated with the No Child Left Behind Act.
Right.
Yeah.
Has not done any favors for our kids.
No.
Basically, what they're doing is they are preparing and teaching based on these very high stakes standardized tests. I'd like to see us move away from that, because I just don't think teaching to a test is providing kids with the knowledge and the critical skills or the critical thinking skills that they need to be successful and to expand their base of knowledge. I
Not
realize
only
we've got to measure things, but we can't only care about those things that we measure.
not only does it not help our children, it really hinders our teachers. They are really
Hands are tied.
affected.
Their
by
hands are
this.
tied, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, for sure. I think that if we went around and asked teachers what the biggest problems that they experience are, I think that we would probably hear three things. I think we would hear the pay. I think we would hear the pressure of these standardized tests. And I think we would hear about a lack of support from either the parents or the administration of the school. And I think that to really solve these problems, it's not simply a factor of money. It's really a factor of figuring out ways to get the community into the schools and get the parents into the schools. And
Daniel,
that's a tall order, when you've got parents who are working several jobs and trying to provide for their families. There's not a lot of opportunities for those people to participate in the school, and we need to figure out some sort of model or some sort of program that helps them get into the schools and support their children the way that they need to be supported.
Daniel, you made an excellent point. I just was having a conversation with one of my son's teachers, and he said the same thing. He said, about 3/4 of the way through the school year, he's got to stop down and start teaching and preparing them for these standardized tests. Meanwhile, he still has an entire agenda that he needs to attend. He needs to cram into this school year somehow, some way. And so, he finds that, a bit of a challenge because, he's got an entire curriculum he has planned, but they also have to fit in these standardized tests, which he thinks is a major distraction for the school year.
Well, and then we have this whole, did you fill out the survey for the SCEA? Daniel?
I have not. I've seen the survey, but I haven't had a chance to fill it out yet.
In that survey, they said that there's a $26 billion gap in the teachers' retirement fund. And so I don't know how you get there. How did they get there?
That's a huge,
I know that's I guess the $26 billion question. When we are asking public employees to sacrifice on their paycheck, they expect to be compensated at some point. I think that how we've been doing it is we're guaranteeing them a pension.
Right. So they're making a sacrifice on the front end, but they're hoping to make it up on the back end.
Exactly. And these are commitments that we have made to our teachers. And I think that we need to stand by those commitments. That's not to say that I'm against, looking into how to improve pensions and other benefits for teachers to make it so that we're not in a gigantic deficit. But these are benefits that they have earned, and it's not in our purview to take those away from them. I don't think. I think that we need to honor.
Agreed.
No, absolutely, and I just can't believe that it's gone unaddressed.
I know, and then it's just it's something that desperately needs to be addressed. I think that, it's not just a South Carolina problem. I think that when you look at pension programs, they're underwater in a lot of different areas, and it's going to require some creative solutions to be able to address those.
That actually makes me really excited. I am so excited to come up with those solutions, because I really think that once you you figure it out, then you can play with that across the board and fund a lot of different things. It's just getting in there and getting enough information to be able to do that. And my concern is when we get there, what is it? How much resistance are we going to get?
Yeah, right. What's it going to look like? Yeah, what's the political horizon going to look like there? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that it's when you get there, that's opening a can of worms, because you're going to have sort of two fields. You're going to have the teachers who are entitled to these benefits, and then you're going to have the Republicans who are dead set on creating more of a 401k type program for them, and it's going to be a hard fight.
Quick question for you, Daniel, and this is kind of a question for the times that we're in right now. I just got off the phone with one of my son's teachers, and the reason why I was on the phone with him is because so they're doing the e-learning from home, and so my son would hit the send button, and a bunch of his assignments were not going through. So he had a bunch of incompletes, and I know they're being done because I'm supervising them, to the point where we now have to take a picture of his assignment before he sends it on his cell phone as backup. So I was on the phone with the teacher, and I said to him, not for nothing, is my son the only one having these technical difficulties? And he laughed. He said, no, I was actually on the phone with one of my kids' teachers because their assignment's not going through, and I know they're doing it because he's there overseeing the assignments. So we had a chuckle. But, the business analyst side of me, and Rebecca knows too, because she was one of the first things I would look at in a business when I walked in is, what's your disaster recovery program look like? And I asked him the same thing. I said, was there a disaster program put in place? He said, yes and no. There was kind of a structure put in place, but there's nothing to reinforce it or to test it or to see if it even worked. It was sort of like putting a fire escape up, but hand tightening the bolts basically to the side of the building. So it's there, but you're not sure if it's going to hold or it's going to actually work. So with that said, is there anything in place right now with the South Carolina schools for disaster recovery? Because you experience hurricanes, and of course this pandemic no one can foresee, but nevertheless, it's disaster recovery.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, we are prepared for those weeks that seem to come every fall when we have a threat of a hurricane and we miss a week of school, and then we later make up those days throughout the year. I think that what I've noticed with my own children's schooling, they're in first and second grade, was a lot of trial by error. I think that the teachers have, by and large, done a tremendous job adapting to this new environment.
Creating workarounds for the yes, exactly.
This is no way a knock on the teachers, because, like I said, my appreciation for them has only grown after trying to homeschool my kids for.
Agreed. And you know what? I didn't want my statement to come across that way, because they've been wonderful working, doing a workaround with some of the shortcomings with these issues.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly privy to what's going on at the school district level. What I hope is going on is that they are planning for the very real possibility that we're not going to be able to send our kids to school in the physical sense that we were prior to this pandemic. There may be a way to stagger on different kinds of days, but if this virus is still prevalent and there's no vaccine, that's a tough position for people to send their children into that environment. So what I'm hoping is that they are investing in technology that makes it so that there's a single portal for parents and students to log into. Right now, it's very much a piecemeal approach with different links that take you to different websites and programs, and I'd like to see them utilize more of a single portal to make it easier on the parents who are trying to get their kids to do their assignments.
Yeah, piecemeal, I think, is the unfortunate term, among that. So yes, that probably should be something maybe you roll your sleeves up and address, early on during your administration.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing that we need to think about is that there's a wide discrepancy in who has broadband internet and who doesn't. I heard a stat that it was a very high percentage of Charleston County students have not logged in since this pandemic began, and I can't remember the exact percentage, but I want to say it was very shocking, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 40%.
Right.
And so I think that if we're going to deliver education in a 21st century manner, we need to do a lot of work to expand broadband access. There's one bill that I want to promote because I think that it would help a lot of our rural areas, and that's a bill by Justin Bamberg that would allow our electric cooperatives that operate in rural communities to also offer high-speed internet. I think
That's
that
excellent point. Yes.
if we're not seeing AT&T and Charter and Comcast and WOW and all these big cable companies serving our communities, then we need to do something about it and empower other organizations such as the electric cooperatives to offer that service.
Excellent point. And here's another, it's funny, you reminded me of something. So, one of the teachers made a comment that my son isn't logging on first thing in the morning. And my reply to them is, he doesn't have access to the computer sometimes until later in the morning or sometime in the afternoon, depending on whether he's at my house or his mother's house. So that is also, he doesn't have his own laptop or his own computer. He uses mine or his mother's. And it depends on when he has access to the computer as to when he logs on and does his homework. Sometimes it's not until dinner time or after, if he's with me. So that's something that should probably be addressed as well.
Yeah, I hear you. Our children are sharing devices with us as well. So we're trying to I'm trying to get work done, and I'll pass my computer on, and they'll get their 15 minutes on a math program, and then I'm taking it back, trying to work.
Right.
We do definitely need to make sure that kids have the devices that they need to connect to this technology.
Yeah.
And if it's an issue here in this county, can you imagine what it's like in other parts of the state?
Exactly.
So,
that's an excellent point, Rebecca. So the lesser district with lesser income, or just a single parent household, I'm sure that's even a bigger issue for them. That's a good point.
Yeah, and it's very difficult for us to go back to normal until our kids are back in school.
Right.
There's not a lot of childcare options in the middle of a pandemic, so it's going to be very challenging for us to get our economy back up and rolling when parents are worried about taking care of their children during the day, and I think that's going to be a persistent difficulty for us.
Right.
Well, I think it's exciting only in the way that it's going to get us thinking in different areas that we can do things differently, that we have to do things differently. And so it does make me think that there's hope that we will solve these issues, and it'll bring us a brighter future.
If anything, it's got to have expanded our appreciation for teachers. There's just no way that you can homeschool your kids for 7 weeks and think that teachers are overpaid or not worth it. It's just it takes a true professional to do this, and I've realized I am not that true professional. I'm the last person who should be teaching my kids, every day and trying to keep them up to speed. If anything, I'll give them ice cream at 10 in the morning if that allows me to get 20 minutes of work done.
Right.
It's a struggle, and I really feel for the parents throughout this state who are really trying to juggle a lot of things right now, and I think they're doing a tremendous job. I think they're doing it as good as they can, and that's enough. People need to realize that they are not Superman or Superwoman, and just really getting through day to day, getting by day to day is a victory in this climate.
Daniel, you have something, because I was going to say, Rebecca, I was going
I
to say,
do.
listen,
We
go ahead.
have about 2 minutes to go.
Right.
And I just wanted to give a shout out to Primrose, which is where my daughter goes. They have stayed open and done super cleaning, and no, we have not been sick, not even a sniffle or a cold since the pandemic started. So whatever they're doing a great job, which allows me to get a lot done during the day. So
Right.
I appreciate
That
it.
is excellent.
Yeah.
Daniel, I was going to say a couple things with you. I meant to do this last time, but speaking of shout outs, want you, any websites that people can go to for your information, and they can watch this, and any last thoughts you may have.
You have 20
in closing.
seconds. Sorry.
Awesome. Go to danielbrownstein.com. I do have some quite a bit of information about education there. It is my #1 issue. So if you care about public education and you're in District 112, I'm your guy. Vote for me on June 9th, please.
That's fantastic. Rebecca, any last thoughts? There's
No.
Brownstein there. That's great.
That's great.
So I'm doing it for these guys for sure.
Absolutely. And you're doing a great job. It's very exciting to have you, and it's great to see your family. Rebecca, any last thoughts?
No, until next time.
Until next time, we'll see you. Take care, guys.
See y'all later. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.